Welcome to Love and Life. I'm Dr. Karin Anderson-Abril here with my co-host,
Pastor Elliott Anderson.
And Love and Life is your place to hear conversations grounded in psych research, psychotherapy,
and biblical truth
to help us thrive in love and life. Elliott, we have babies coming this summer.
I know, it's so exciting.
I know. We have our niece who is our oldest niece. So you and I will, for the first time, become not just aunt and uncle, we will become great aunt and great uncle.
Really cool.
It's very exciting. And even as an added bonus blessing, it's going to be a little boy named Simon after our father. So I know the Love and Life family has heard a lot about Simon through your book, Simon Says, and what a blessing to have a legacy baby boy. So also on my side of things, we've got my stepson's wife is having a baby, also a boy, and also named after a grandfather, I guess great-grandfather. Cool. Yeah. So it'll be named after Dan's dad, Max, who passed away a year ago.
Yeah, awesome.
I know.
I don't know if I'd heard that yet.
Yeah. Oh, I know. It's very touching. It's definitely the kind of thing that brings tears to your eyes. And everyone's doing well and healthy babies and coming in June and July. Also, I have a little physical therapy thing that I'm dealing with, and one of my physical therapists is pregnant. And as we were talking, she, because she's working on you for 45 minutes to get to talking, and I told her about the podcast because she was asking what I do and so forth. And I thought, wouldn't it be nice to do a series on how to keep your marriage strong with this huge life cycle change? And change can be as positive as can be, like a newborn baby. There's one of the most profound and beautiful experiences that God has given us. Yet, change can also be very stressful. When we look at the stress scale that you and I remember.
Eustress, EUSTRESS, right? The eustress. I love that term.
You're remembering, and I didn't remember. I just remembered the sheet that a Professor Shea passed out in probably Marriage and Family.
I use a modified version of that still today for my classes.
Well, so it's so important because this is a great example and a great way to segue into our conversation is that no one expects, they know it's going to be chaotic and a life change, but no one expects that there are going to be such complex emotions when a change is a positive change, like marriage, like even moving to a new house, right. And certainly new baby. So we sometimes downplay, and it's understandable because we're just so excited, but we want to be really careful as we make these big family life cycle transitions to make sure that we are doing so, moving through these stages, equipped to know and be ready for some of the changes. And what I thought would be fun for us to do with you as an expert in this, because when your family life cycle changed in this manner, you got not only one baby boy, you got two baby boys. And then within 9 months, you had a baby girl, and within another year, another baby girl. So 4 in diapers, and it was romper room and the most adorable thing on the planet. However, again, a lot. And
beautiful chaos. Yes.
Beautiful chaos. But for our families that are growing this summer, I thought it might be nice to talk about how to keep your marriage strong, even when the new little nugget shows up. And let's start with the dad, since I have a dad here with me. Let's just start from the basics. I think it's kind of good to start with a dad, frankly, because with a pregnancy, it's all about the mom, as it should be, because she's the one carrying this sweet little angel gift from God. But dads want to do their best to support, and yet they can't fully experience. They're not going through the hormonal changes. They're not going through the body changes. They're not going through the delivery, which is a rough time for all involved. And yet they want to be supportive, and they want to now take on this brand new role of father, and yet still remain first and foremost husband. When I'm going back to now our structural family therapy, we recognize that the mother and the father in most families also possess the husband and wife role. They're the same people possessing all 4 of those roles. And in structural family therapy, we want to remember that the hierarchy is important. And so a marriage needs to be the center of the family, even when this new innocent baby shows up.
And I think the changes, Karin, do start before the baby.
Sure.
Right? When I'm coaching young couples on this, it is, you have to do it sensitively with your communication, but in a sense, you're both pregnant. because you're both expecting, right? You're both expecting these changes, and every woman's pregnancy is different. Some women feel amazingly beautiful and holistically more positive and more joyful in their pregnancy and have that glow, and it creates even a more peaceful and harmonious marriage. For others, though, it's hell. They're sick the entire time and cramp and hurt and pain and maybe mandated bed rest. And the pregnancies can mess the hormones all over the place. And sometimes that makes a woman more in tune to her physicality and her sexuality in a way that the man's like, whoa, that's kind of a nice addition. Other times it's the opposite. She feels anything but sexually responsive and evident. And that can be a massive change for a man as well. So even in the pregnancy stage, the anticipatory and expectation elements do impact the man. And a majority of men, especially those who we would coach to live within their masculinity, provision, protection, hands-on, assertiveness, direction, leadership, it's hard to feel like you can't do anything to help. And so the communication process, and some women get annoyed when their husband now treats them like a wounded warrior and like that she's not supposed to do anything anymore, not even open her own door ever, right? And some women like that attention, some get annoyed. So the adjustments happen before the baby. When conception is revealed and we know the baby's in there, that can alter things up front. And so the better we communicate ahead of time, the better we can communicate about the change and about the transition.
A few years ago, I started having trouble falling asleep, and I started taking melatonin because I thought it was a natural way to try to relax myself, calm myself down, and go to sleep. But it turns out that as a hormone supplement, melatonin can disrupt our other hormones, and we can build up an immunity to it. So when we started partnering with the wellness company, I was super excited to try their melatonin-free sleep aid called Restful Sleep. It includes passion flower, chamomile, valerian root, among other herbs, and natural ways to help calm us down and get us ready to go to bed. I've been using it for a couple months now, and Restful Sleep helps my mind and body quiet themselves and ease into sleep. If you've ever had insomnia, you know how brutal it is. The wellness company's Restful Sleep can help. Head over to twc.health/lovelife and enter promo code LOVELIFE at checkout for 15% off your entire order. That's twc.health/lovelife and promo code LOVELIFE for 15% off your entire order.
So that's the first response, Karin, if you want to feedback off that before I move into then after the baby's born.
Well, it occurred to me when you said that, which I think this is such an important point. Absolutely. From the moment that they know they're pregnant. And then to your point about the biological realities, whether the woman feels those hormonal rushes and feels that glow, which I see these girls in our lives, and I think they glow. They may not feel that when they feel they got a big old basketball in their belly right now. So what I see may not be what they're feeling internally. And then let's speak to the reality that some women, to even get pregnant, have gone through a year of injections and hormonal changes with IVF procedures, which is also the reality. And I've been through that personally, so I know what that feels like. And I unfortunately wasn't able to get pregnant, but I know what that kind of invasive disruption to your body, A, and to your hormones, B, and to your physical connection to your husband potentially. And there's the grieving there. Like, it shouldn't have to be this way. Why I'm poking and prodding my body. Why couldn't it have just come naturally? So think about that emotional distress on a woman, and then to finally have the elation of being pregnant. But then, like, now we've got the 9 months of what you just described a few minutes ago. I think it's a really important point. I'm glad you started there.
Yeah, and it's invasive. That's a great word.
Yeah,
it's invasive. There's a child in your uterus, right? It's like a massive change, and then every woman knows that childbirth is likely going to be difficult in some capacity, and so it's almost like preparing for a little bit of suffering.
Yeah.
Right. And we know even vaginal tearing and things that take place, that physiologically, even after the birth, there can be quite a bit of time of physiological recovery. In my wife's case, it was emergency C-section, and they didn't have time to make the cut simple and sweet. It was like literally life or death. And so that was a massive change for my wife, just looking at this massive scar on her abdomen, even though, of course, the beauty of Olivia was worth it all, but it's still a massive change in how a woman feels physiologically about her body, because it changes, right? The hips widen, all those things we know are physiologically true realities. And yes, that impacts sexuality, but impacts everything: mental, emotional, self-identity. And then, if we on a baseline start of what's the most invasive after the child is born, it's the sleep.
Yeah.
Right. And we know sleep regulation is so important for all of us, no matter what the age. But man, when that little baby, they do not have the sleep cycle we're used to. Right. And so it creates a firestorm quickly. It's joyful. You're having amazing euphoric feelings of, holy cow, I'm a parent, especially if it's the first one. But then you're also dealing with, how are we going to function through this? And Karin, it sounds so simple, but it's not. But it's a season of marriage where over communication needs to take place.
Okay, so brass tacks now, because there's a lot. I mean, you're bringing up so many things. Obviously, I've not had a newborn in my life, and so I'm like, oh yeah, the sleep thing, that is a big one. I hear that all the time. So when you're talking about for husbands, your number one recommendation that I'm sure will infiltrate every other recommendation you give is, this is the time, if you've not had in your marriage that tendency to be pretty upfront, pretty communication at the ready, in time, like in real time.
I call it pre-communication. You and I have used that term before.
All right, do it.
Another marital thing. Another example is like the empty nest stage, which I'm in, although the nest doesn't seem to stay empty. But it's pre-communicating about that as well. You know what's coming. You know your kids are getting ready to move out. You know your kids, right? So you got to pre-communicate. All I mean is communicate about the issue before it's actually happened.
Right.
So now in this sense, we're pre-communicating, over-communicating about sleep. I mean, I have worked with couples where their babies seem to be angels from God that literally get into 6-7 hours sleep within 2 months, which is very rare.
Right.
Very rare. So a reality of a majority, I would say 90% of all couples, maybe 95%, is your sleep is going to be massively disrupted now for at least 3 months, possibly 6. And occasionally, if kids develop sleep issues, which is not uncommon either, you can have 3-4 years of now sleep deprived states. And that changes everything. You literally start to feel like you're either stoned or you're like in a disassociative state. Or I remember there was many times when all 4, I know our scenario was extreme, but there's all 4. And obviously I was getting up with Angie every single time, and it was helpful. Our boys were adopted, so it wasn't breastfeeding, it was bottle feeding. And they were pretty structured on their schedule, but we still had feedings at like 10 o'clock p.m. and then 2 a.m. and like 5:36 a.m. And when people ask me all the time, well, how in the world did you write a book during that era? I wrote it from the 2:30 feeding until 5 with my ADHD and my hyper energy. If I'm up to feed my boys at 2:30 in the morning, I cannot get back to sleep. And so I just went through about a 6-month season, and then that morphed even differently when Olivia was born and she had her preemie issues. But I switched my sleep schedule for that whole time frame, and I got my body adjusted. But that's when I wrote Answers in Abundance, was the 2:30 to 5 a.m. quiet in my office in that process. So that's just an example of one scenario. So the pre-communication, getting back to the brass tacks, is we know that baby's coming, and we know in all likelihood there's going to be massive sleep deprivation. So talking ahead of time, what's the expectation for each other? Some wives are like, I got it. They don't want to wake their husband up. He's got a busy schedule and he still needs to work. If she's not working for a little bit, at least some type of leave. Otherwise, they're like, no, you get your rear end up with me, right? It again, depends on the relationship. I don't think there's a necessary right or wrong here, but there's a matter of talking it through and pre-communicating about the sleep schedule, the diaper schedule, who's getting, there's going to be a lot more laundry, a lot more dishes, a lot more assertiveness on cleanliness becomes a big issue. We don't want our little babies getting sick. We don't want our babies, having dirty bottles and things like that. So it just ramps everything way up.
So what strikes me is there's also with a new little human that you are going to raise together, you're bringing up sleep as one of the first hurdles because it's going to be a massive disruption. Who's going to get up with the baby? Are you going to take turns? Is it going to be mostly mom because she's on maternity leave, or is it going to be mostly dad?
And if she's breastfeeding, obviously she has to get up. So
right,
it's a little different depending on what the feeding is.
Right. So, but then the other thing I'm thinking of is I remember you and Angie did Baby Wise, which I don't know if the people are doing that right now, but there are some theories that getting your babies onto a schedule as soon as possible really helps them with their new chaotic life because they were tucked in mommy's belly for 9 months and now they're out here and the sounds and the stimuli.
Yes.
And it's overwhelming for the baby too, of course. And that getting the babies on a schedule can be really helpful. Now, then I'm sure there's other theories that are just let the kid on demand feed, and that's when
and
the
swaddle
baby
for the first 2 months of life.
Well,
There's
and now
lots of
you
different
got
theories
babies in
and
the bed till they're 25. So there's a lot. So what my point is in the midst of all these changes, every single decision the couple will make as they take on their parenting role will be laden with values. And one parent might say, well, I value the structure. And I think that that is important, not just for us as a couple, but also for our baby. And the other member of the couple might say, well, I don't think that that's correct. I think that babies need to be attended to for attachment and for bonding. They need to have their needs met as soon as they need them. We shouldn't put them on our schedule. We should adjust to their schedule. So these are, talk about communication. If the couple is not aware of how many layers of values these are, they could be fighting about things and not understanding that it's really coming from a place of like philosophy of living and philosophy of doing life. And maybe they've aligned as a marital couple, but when the child comes, it kicks into a whole new level of potential conflict because of values that they really haven't had to tackle yet.
All your family of origin systemics come back. So you might have created your brand new couple identity that has understood each other's past and backgrounds, and you've kind of merged those together, got great synchronicity and harmony and peace, and then boom, you have a baby or two, and now your family of origin roots come flying right back up. Well, my mom did it this way, and it was great, and I turned out good, so why aren't we doing this way? And then the husband's like, but my mom did this way, and this is how I turned out, and this is good. And so now we kind of get stuck, and once we start getting positional, meaning this is the way I did it, this is the way we should do it. And the partner's like, well, this way I did it, it's the way we should do it. That's getting positional because we're just saying, well, this is right. And rather than positional, we need to talk about perception and perspective. And so once we start digging our heels in about things, and it's not uncommon for a young mother, and this makes sense for her to say, well, I'm the one feeding and I'm the one who carried the baby. So I'm going to be the one to set the schedule. And I totally get that. But if you want your husband to stay engaged, you want your husband to lead and stay in partnership, we got to make these as couple-oriented decisions as possible, like you were just hinting at. And that's why even some pre-communication about that. And if we have couples out there listening right now that are 7 months pregnant, like, oh, we got 2 months yet. We can kind of talk through these a little bit and at least get an idea of what we might want to do. I'm working with 2 couples who are in this process right now. And one is like Angie and I, they waited quite a while, not in their own waiting. The Lord's timing waited quite a while. And now they're recognizing in pre-communication, holy cow, we got a lot of differences about how we want to raise these kids. And so if a couple's telling me we're arguing about where to send the kid to college while they're pregnant, I'm saying, save that one. Get through middle school before you start talking about college.
We got time for that. We got time.
Other than maybe savings plan, maybe start a savings plan or something.
Sure.
But if they're talking about we're wrestling through how much I want to work again, if the mother's been a full-time, now that's a worthy one to pre-communicate. Because, her leave maybe is 6 weeks or 2 months. And she'd never thought before. This happened with one couple who's pre-communicating about now they're going to try to get pregnant. And she had been, like my wife had been, before she was thinking about getting pregnant, always saying, I'm going back to work. Angie had always said that. I love teaching. I'm a gifted teacher. I can't imagine not teaching. We'll make sure with moms and aunts and others that we are getting primary care from people we trust and love, not putting them in a big daycare. For other families, there's no option. Daycare has to happen, So we're not poo-pooing that. We're just saying in our scenario and this other couple scenario, they had always said, the woman always said, I'm going to go back to work. now, before the maternal hormones changed and the pregnancy's there, she is now adjusting like Angie did. Mm-hmm. And after the boys were there, and then the surprise pregnancy with Olivia, she's like, there's no way I'm going back to work. Mm-hmm. Now, I was flexible and accepting, and I had a position at Judson high enough at that point that we could become a one-income family. It was still tough, but for some couples, you don't have that option. And so that's another area, Karin, that needs to be pre-communicated, or at least communicating as you're changing, as you're thinking, as you're processing through. Those are all massively important.
And it sounds like here, and I do appreciate that you are reminding the couple that, yes, the bulk of everything from pregnancy, carrying this baby, delivering this baby, nursing the baby, that is on the mom. But we don't want her to exclude her husband from the decision-making of everything, even though, yes, it's mostly on her. But if we do that, we end up with an alliance between mama and baby that dad could feel excluded. And then that immediately is going to disrupt the hierarchy in the home, even when that baby is just a little infant. We could set the stage for that kind of alliance. We talk about that in family systems as well. We want to keep the dad involved, especially because it's really important for her to feel that help. And you don't want him to feel like, oh, now you want my help later because you kept me out of some of these early decisions. I mean, even something as basic as helping the dad bond. I was telling Jackie and Adam about this a while ago. Even things that I teach in my developmental psych class, like it's a great idea for the dad to be reading to the mom's belly. There's research that talks about this. There's a great study called the Cat in the Hat study. And the way that it's adorable, they rig the baby up later, even in the first couple weeks of life, with a little pacifier that the sucking rate will change. They've got the little baby in headphones, which story is being read to them and some audio file. And the babies will suck to the extent that they can get the either slower or faster. Once they kind of catch on to how this works, they'll slower or faster to get the story that mom and dad read to them when they were in utero. So they are hearing, they're remembering. And if that's happening for mom, certainly dad should be doing that too, so that the baby gets familiar with his voice because he's hearing mom's voice all day, every day. But that kind of thing, also skin on skin contact. So
absolutely, yeah.
So boxer and diaper time, belly to belly. If you're taking a nap, bring your baby and take that onesie off so that the belly to belly for dad, because mom has so much oxytocin flowing during her nursing process and all that skin on skin contact. We want dad to have that bonding experience as well. But I love that you highlight that to try to encourage moms to include dad in these decisions to the extent that it's possible, so that he does feel like he's part of this, and you don't have that alliance between mom and and again, we talk about this years later, we can have a mama's boy situation because dad has been in effect excluded. So I'm glad that you brought that up.
A lot of men are scared of babies and haven't been around babysit.
Sure. They didn't babysit.
And I wasn't scared of babies because I'm such a people person, but I had zero idea what I was doing. I didn't know how to burp a baby. I was going to figure out diaper changing, but it was a mess for a while. If it wasn't easy, and that sounds weird, but it wasn't. But some men who are scared, and if the woman responds to his fear with condemning him or making fun of him,
or like, I got this then, because clearly you don't know what
he will likely start to just get into protection provision mode, which is good still, but disengage from the bonding and disengage from the nurturance, and start to resent his wife a little bit that the baby is getting all the skin touch. The baby's getting all the cooing and the nice words and the positivity. And then when he wants a little snuggle time and feel her body also, she's like, no, you haven't been doing jack squatting this whole time. And now he's getting rejected there. And so it's very common for new husbands, new fathers to be jealous of their babies.
Yep.
Even when they're crazy about them, even when they love them. And so that's another whole dynamic. And I know a wife can be sitting here and a young mom saying, are you kidding me? That his focus is so much about himself and his needs that he's jealous of our baby? And the answer is yes. Because as we've talked about with love language, and we've talked about in male needs and how physiological touch and connection with their wife bonds them to her. And yes, it tends to be sexual as a primary, but that's truly what you want as a woman. Don't you want your wife centered on you as a woman, right? You want your husband centered on you as a woman, that his sex drive and his need to connect and emotionally bond. And men often need sex to get emotional connection. Women need emotional connection to get the sex. And so understandably, she's been through this massive event and she's not going to feel like it as much. And sometimes she can be like, get away from me. And the man will feel that rejection so strongly, he might disengage from the baby, even when you're not asking him to.
Yeah.
So I think that dynamic has to be talked through and has to be communicated through. It's not uncommon for men to reach out to me and say, we haven't had sex in 7 weeks and she hasn't touched me at all. And I am going crazy.
Yeah.
I am struggling with lust now. I haven't struggled with in 6 years. And right. And it's like, I don't feel like I can talk to her about it because she's frustrated with me. And those little divisions can start and affect the parenting, affect the marriage again. And you and I are saying the marriage has to come first.
Yeah.
And that sounds bizarre. There's a little dependent baby that needs a lot. And we're still saying somehow, some way, the marriage has to stay forefront. And that takes a ton of sacrifice and work from both.
And it goes against, I think, probably biological impulse in that first year of life. I am sure that the woman's focus, again, to keep this baby alive, she has to move. Although, again, it's not really fair because she didn't get that baby without him. So, like, you got to remember, if dad weren't around, you would not have this baby in your belly, but it's so all consuming. And I'm sure that that's God wired it that way to protect this little baby. So this baby's going to make it. Because if mom isn't obsessed with that baby,
that's right,
baby's not going to make it. But let's look at also, God also designed dad to be there and to feel like it matters that his existence wasn't just thanks for the sperm. We got this. And we know, again, from all the research in developmental psych, a 2-parent home, kids have way better chance
by far, yes.
It's not even close. The prisons are full of this is not to disparage single moms. They do the best they can, but it's just not even close. Prisons sadly are full and kids drop out of high school more readily and all the things. Yeah. My point is we want to, even in the midst of what is stressing everyone out, like you said, especially for first babies, we want to make sure that everyone feels that they are contributing and that we don't completely displace the marital role. Like just coming back to that. And if a man is feeling that like, oh, I was good for sex when you wanted a baby and now you got your baby. Well, I mean,
so sometimes a woman gets obsessive about the sex in order to get the baby.
Yeah.
And for the man, it's like, yes, I've been waiting for this.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, boom, it switches. She's got the baby and she's like, gosh, don't touch me. I feel crappy. I've had throw up on me all day. I've had food dribbled on me. I feel nauseous, right? Understandably, it's all understandable. And Karin, what I've found, and we'll get into this on another episode, but I'm saying it out loud to remind us and for Tim to hold us accountable for it. What I found is that the first baby is not the most significant change in the marital dynamic. It's once there's a second. And so I'm just putting that out as a teaser because I don't want to get moving that today, but that's what I found way more common. And I'll explain why later. But in this first one, your pattern for the second one is developed. That's why I brought it up. And so how you tackle this first one and how you pre-communicate and what systemics you put in. And as soon as possible, I recommend these 2 major things. First one is make sure the mother, the wife, gets her own time every single day. Even if it's only a half hour, make sure she can be separate from the baby and separate from you, husbands, for at least a half hour, maybe an hour. If you live close enough to just let her walk around Target, and she might find great joy just walking around Target without feeling this urgency about the baby and this desire to like, where is she? Where is he? What's he doing? Right? It's just becomes so consuming. So at least a half hour, an hour every single day. And if you need a maternal influence in the home when that happens, because your husband's clueless and you don't trust him, well, then find a best friend or a older mother in the church. And if you're blessed like we were to have you and Leah and other great godly women pretty close to us, then take advantage of that time. And I know parents all the time are telling me, oh my goodness, I hate being a burden to my mom, a burden to my sister. I'm like, nonsense. This is the joy of the body of family and the body of Christ. We need to reach out to each other when we're hurting. The second one is the exact same thing about the marriage. You got to get at least a half hour every day of just marital talk that has nothing to do with your baby. And what happens is we get so consumed and we're so joyful. And in our case, when you had 402, there was so many things to talk about the children and about the schedule. It was hard to make sure we were talking about just me and her.
Mm-hmm.
And we had our mother-in-law, Susie, come and live with us for a whole month. And that helped a ton to be able to get some kind of space for Angie. And then eventually a little bit of space for me and her at the same time, because it was all consuming. Then we moved in friends upstairs because we just couldn't, the functionality alone was so exhausting. We couldn't even get to the point of maritally, where are we? We have no idea where we are right now. All we have is babies and diapers everywhere. 3 different schedules at one time. Because people would ask me, isn't this an amazing blessing? You have these 4 kids like this? No, not at all. It's incredibly difficult. Quadruplets would have been easier than 3 different schedules. Every mother out there understands what we're saying here. The dads are like, what's he talking about? Quadruplets are on the same schedule. We had 3 children, 3 sets of children on different schedules. So feeding and diapers, and it was just, and even the nap schedules were interladen. And so you couldn't get them all on the same schedule. And Liv was preemie. And so she had all kinds of preemie issues and threw up every single meal for like the first 6 months. So every time Angie breastfed her, boom, throwing up on her every time. So I have fun pictures, where the boys are like trying to climb up on Angie while she's feeding Liv and all that. And that's an extreme case. But what I'm saying is we had to focus so hard on just the systemic of the kids. It truly felt exhausting to even talk 5 minutes about the budget.
Mm-hmm.
And yet the budget was very important because we didn't have Angie's teaching money at that point, right? And so that's why you have to do those 2 main things. Make sure you're carving out at least a half hour for the mom to be a woman outside of being a mother and a wife, and a half hour for the couple to talk about something other than the kids. And now when the kids got seriously sick or someone fell and needs stitches, of course it's I'm not saying to the point of absurdity, but if you want to keep that marriage strong and preeminent, you got to set it on baby 1, because after baby 2, it really alters, and then it starts to get hard to go back and recreate a systemic you haven't been in for a couple of years.
So I'm hearing that we need to think of communication, and probably as a default recommendation, you're going to need to communicate much more frequently and in much more depth, probably than you've even had to.
Yes.
If you've gotten that nice routine as a couple and you fell in love, you got married, things have been going well, you got that groove, and now you have an entirely different domain that you need to start to have these conversations about, and recognize that when you have differences, it's probably because there are different values. So then to unpack that, well, for example, like we were talking about earlier, sleep schedule. Well, what does it mean to you that, or should we use our statements, not our questions,
That's
like we've been talking about, but the idea that you're trying to reflect and respond to each other's values, so you have an understanding that if they're coming from a different position, that it's because of a value, and can you find the common ground? That's first recommendation.
So
1.
a statement would be, I'm struggling with our systemic. Let's walk through it a little bit. Different than, hey, why are you always doing the sleep schedule like this?
Yeah.
Right now you're like, boom. And hey, get off my back.
Especially
I'm the one
the
taking care
why.
of this baby. Of course, right? So then that's why I'm saying just a systemic comment like that.
Right. To get that.
Or like, I'm just hurting, hun. I'm not upset at our system, but I have got to change sleep thing. I can't focus at work. I'm making mistakes, right? Things like that. You're just making the comment. You're opening your heart and just sharing your soul a little bit so you can dialogue together on what do we need to do next.
Yeah. And then the second thing would be time. And I do want to underscore again, Professor Shea comes up once again, one of our psych professors from Judson. I remember him saying, and I've never forgotten it, obviously, because it's something so profound. We've talked about it before, but it really bears repeating right now. The number one job of a father is to love the mother of his children. That statement in and of itself brings us back to the marriage.
Yes, puts that on the priority.
The number one job of a father is to love the mother of his children, to keep that marriage strong. That's his wife. He would lay down his life for her, and the child will benefit. Because I think what would be easy to happen is that both husband and wife step 100% into their mother-father role, and they're on it, and that baby's going to benefit, and we're going to raise the best kid, and we're going to love on this kid, and we're going to provide all the needs for this child. And then 2 years later, they look at each other like, well, who are you? Because I know you as a father, and I know you as a mother. Well, who are we as husband and wife?
You're
the baby is going to suffer.
Yeah, you're creating child-centric systemic where that 5-year-old literally runs the family. It's that entitlement piece that gets moved up. I know you were heading there. I just jumped to it.
No, I'm glad you did, because that's a good pithy way of saying it. Child-centric home versus marriage-centric home.
And we need a whole episode on that, because I got a lot on that one.
Well, especially because you think you're doing the right thing. So it's a bit counterintuitive. It might feel a little bit weird. Like this infant is vulnerable and needs us every minute of the day. We can't take that half hour for husband and wife time. And what we're reminding
you must. Yeah.
Is the best thing you can do for your newborn baby is to make sure your marriage stays strong and preeminent and on top of this hierarchy. And when you do that, the baby's going to benefit. And to your point,
in the long run,
in the long run,
won't benefit when you walk out the door and they're screaming their head off. But in the long run, and again, I don't want to get into that episode now.
No, you're right.
There's a lot there, but
we can deal with that later.
And Tim and I were talking this morning before you got on, Karin, with your new computer issues that I was very patient about. But Tim and I were talking about. I was like, "You remember those days, Tim?" Because I told him what we were going to talk about. We were going to talk about early children and marriage and stuff. And he's like, "No, I actually have blocked a lot about that out." You see,
really?
He's already blocked, and so did I. It was so profound and so difficult. Angie will tell me memories about certain things. I'm like, I don't remember that at all.
Yeah.
And part of that's because I was a vice president at the time. I had a busy schedule. I was still going into Judson for 8-9 hours a day still. Often, Karin, I would do that 2:30 to 5 writing. And then Angie would get back up for the next round with the boys, and especially with Liv when she was there. I'd eat my food and I'd just go to work. So I was literally sleeping from like 8 to 2. And that was it.
Yeah.
And then, right, I was heading in. And so I would get a ton done at work early. But so there's a bunch of memories and a bunch of rhythms that as a husband and a father, just like Tim, we were all in, but I still kind of missed some things. And part of it, I think it's male compartmentalization, right? If I had a huge day at work, I can't just call in and go, "Hey, Olivia's sick. I can't come." Occasionally I can, but not as a regular.
Right.
And so that's what I mean about that male differential sometimes. And some wives get really frustrated with their husbands when they don't remember. And just remember, we're wired differently, and she's got the primary feeding and things early. If she's breastfeeding, that just make it different. And that's part of the recognition and acceptance about each other, that even the best fathers are still going to have a different perception of many things that happen than the wife, who's a great mother also.
Yeah, that's so true.
All right, I got to pray us out.
Yeah.
All right, Lord, thank you so much for the gift of life, first of all, and the gift of life and the beauty of conception, the miracle of conception, Lord. One of the things that points people to you more regularly than anything else. Yeah, the cosmos and crazy, amazing things like the Grand Canyon, the Niagara Falls, just help people see the general revelation of who you are. But I don't think anything does it like a child, the miracle of gestation and delivery and the gift of life. And at the same time, Lord, it's a very positive, beautiful, chaotic change in life and change in marriage and relationship. So for our own family members who are expecting children soon, for all our listeners who are expecting children soon, or those thinking about children or wanting to have children in the future, may they understand the significance holistically. Look at all the changes that are coming and to pre-communicate with their partner and their spouse and walk through in advance. Yes, there might be alterations later, but just by bringing the topics up, just by walking through some of the systemic things Karin and I talked about today, can be a wonderful start to the necessity of intentional engagement, connection, conversation, communication, and even walking through some conflict difference from family of origin, learning how to negotiate, receive, accept without defense, without posturing and positioning. Lord, it's a massive thing. We're just praying as we talk through this series and bring on an expert in early childhood, one of my colleagues in the future here, that it would bless and encourage our listeners in any stage of life and marriage, especially with children. In the name of Jesus, amen.
Love and Life with Dr. Karin and Pastor Elliott is produced by Tim May and executive producer, Dr. Karin Anderson-Abel. For more information about Love and Life, please go to loveandlifemedia.com.